Well, the lame duck session of the 111th Congress is over, and soon a new Congress will be ushered in. President Obama says chief among his priorities in the new year will be the economy.
We now have to pivot and focus on jobs and growth, jump-starting the economy so that we actually start making a dent in the unemployment rate, and we are equipping ourselves so that we can compete in the 21st century.
So will the president and Congress be on the same page? It happens once in a while. I'm joined by our political panel, Nance, CEO of Concerned Women for America, and Fox News contributor, Kirsten Powers. Welcome to you both, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right, so let's talk about 2011. We're looking ahead. In a couple of weeks, we'll have all these new Congress members and those re-elected back here in Washington. Penny, do you think there will be any sense of bipartisanship based on what they did accomplish during the lame duck session?
Well, I think most importantly, we first need to kind of look at what happened in the last Congress. You know, the last Congress was one of the most active in history, but they also were wildly unpopular. They have a 17% approval rating. So what that tells me is they did a lot of stuff, but not a lot of stuff that the American people wanted. So Concerned Women for America did a poll on Election Day. We wanted to know what was driving people to the polls. These were of actual voters, not necessarily CWA members, just general people. We found out that 75% of them were there for the economy, as you would expect. A very high number of those were women. And also 63% of them were there because of moral values. So it's a twofer there. Both of those issues go hand in hand when you're looking at the new Congress. I hope that the new Congress got the memo from the American people and understand that they have got to rein in spending, that they've got to take control of the deficit and of the $14 trillion debt that hangs over the head of every American in America. We've already heard from John Boehner, and the new chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Fred Upton, has said that they plan on repealing and replacing health care. I know that'll be important. So I think I know what the House is going to do. The question is, does the Senate understand? Harry Reid was pushing through as much as he could at the last minute, including Don't Ask, Don't Tell and START treaties and all this extraneous information or bills. And so now are they really willing to do what they need to do and cut spending?
Well, we know that the Senate is still controlled by Democrats. I want to go back to the issue of health care. Kirsten, do you think the GOP gets very far with repealing it by taking away some of the funding?
I don't think so, and I don't frankly think that that was the message that came from the election, and I think it was more about the economy and the deficit, and they're going to come in, they're going to have all these new Tea Party members who have promised to repeal health care. They can't repeal health care because they would have to have a Republican president who wanted to repeal it. Obama could just veto things that they do. So if they want to go around spending time trying to cut off funding, you know, I suppose if they think that's a good use of time, they'll do that. I don't think it's something that's probably going to make them very popular overall with the country, because it is a distraction from what's really important, which is dealing with the economy.
Do you think the parties will be able to find common ground on that? Because, you know, we've got these debt commission recommendations. The president says it's his top priority. Republicans have said jobs, that's their top priority as well. Penny, do you find that there will be some place that they could meet in the middle to actually get something done?
Well, I hope that they can meet in the middle, but often for liberals, what that means is unilateral disarmament from conservatives. And so, you know, Concerned Women for America will be there pushing as far as we can to make sure that all this pork that's being spent is no longer being spent. Things like $300 million a year for Planned Parenthood, $700 million a year for abortion funding for organizations abroad. I mean, there's just a tip of the iceberg. You know, incidentally, Eric Cantor has a site called UCut, where Americans can go in and suggest the kind of cuts they want to see, and I hope people will really utilize that. Tough decisions have to be made in the next Congress. This is not for the weak of heart. We have got to get this under control in order to, you know, protect the future of our kids.
Yeah, people are going to have to, across the board, both parties and everybody in the middle are going to have to make difficult decisions. Kirsten, we know that, you know, Democrats aren't the only ones with pork. I mean, Republicans, we've seen, have plenty of it tucked in when it benefits them as well.
Well, also when we talk about cuts, even U-cut or, you know, pork or earmarks, I mean, these really are just nibbling around the edges. It is not the problem, and Republicans are not willing to look at the military spending, and that is something that has to be looked at. You cannot just take that off of the table when you're looking at spending in the country. Everywhere we're going to have to make cuts and we're going to have to make sacrifices, and nobody's excited about it, but you know, you can't be serious when you take such a big chunk of our economy and say, oh no, we're not going to touch that for political reasons. So, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. I think that a lot more got done in the lame duck session probably than I would expect to happen in the new Congress, but, you know, we'll see.
We will, and we'll get back to the lame duck issue. If you will both stick around, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Thank you to you both. Well,
Thanks very much.
Well, the lame duck session of Congress was anything but, as major legislation made it across the finish line with no time to spare. We're back with our political panel to talk about it. Penny Nance, CEO of Concerned Women for America, and Fox News contributor Kirsten Powers. Thanks for sticking around, ladies. All right, Kirsten, I want to start with you. I mean, there were a lot of things that got done at the last minute. Who do you think the winners and losers were?
You know, I was thinking about that. I'm a little biased because I was so unhappy with what I saw as a capitulation of the president on the tax cuts. And to me, I think that's what has the most far-reaching effects on this country in terms of, the deficit. And I really wish that he hadn't agreed to it. So I think I feel that the Republicans won. I think Don't Ask, Don't Tell was very important and very historic, and I was very happy that it happened. But I don't know that it rises quite to the same level of the sort of economic impact that we're going to have on seeing these tax cuts extended unnecessarily, in my opinion.
All right, Penny, what's your take on the tax cuts, and do you think that the Republicans scored a big win here, or did they lose on some other things? Like Kirsten mentioned, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We have the START treaty that many objected to.
It was definitely a mixed bag. I mean, I think that it was a huge victory that the $1.2 trillion omnibus didn't pass that cost $78,000 just to print. So that was certainly a victory, and the fact that the middle class tax cuts plus the upper income tax cuts were kept in place was important for the economy, important for jobs. But, I got to be honest, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a huge blow to conservatives. But I would argue that instead of sort of settling the question, it muddies the argument at this point, because you still have, if you read pages 130 to 150 of the huge report that came out of the Pentagon, it opens up a lot of questions. Like, for instance, what are chaplains going to do? What does this mean for chaplains that actually sincerely believe that homosexuality is a sin? Can they say that from the pulpit? What about dependent housing? They're going to have to redefine dependence in order to do that.
Why would affect what a pastor says in the pulpit?
Because
that's just scare tactics that I hear all the time, and I think that even the idea that conservatives were dealt a blow, the majority of Americans overwhelmingly support getting rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It is regardless of what they think about homosexuality.
Well, the military personnel, they're not overwhelmingly supported. If you talk to the Army personnel, you talk to the combatants, for the Marine Corps, they overwhelmingly are afraid of what it's actually going to mean for them. So I think
you're using the Marine Corps and you're conflating it with the entire military. It's not the same thing. It's true.
Who are actually the people that go into battle.
Corps do feel that way. Well, so if you want to dismiss the entire rest of the military,
no, I'm just saying that the people who actually on the ground fighting are seriously concerned about this and about military readiness.
You're taking out the Marines, but it is not the representative of the entire military.
But regardless, what are we going to do about housing? What are we going to do about transgender people?
Israel does.
Did they throw out one part of their entire coalition, which is transgender people? What does that mean?
Hold on. Israel has done this for over a decade. So why are we incapable of handling this?
The U.S. is a different country, clearly. We have different sensibilities, and our military has serious concerns in a time of war. So I think we've got a lot of questions.
That's exactly right, and we do have serious concerns, which is why we need to have the best people and not be discriminating against them.
Okay, that is obviously a very heated topic that will not be solved regardless of what they did on Capitol Hill. But I want to ask you about the other, the START treaty, the other thing that came along. There were key Republicans, including John Kyle and other top-ranking Republicans in the Senate, who were holding fast against this thing, and you had to get to 67 votes to get it passed. A big win for the president, Kirsten?
Yeah, I think so. Though, again, I don't really understand why anybody would oppose reducing arms, nuclear arms. So, but I think this was definitely a big win for him. I do think Don't Ask, Tell was a big win for him, but I think that they were both pretty popular positions. There weren't things that the idea that all conservatives are against it, I just don't think in either of those cases is really right.
And Penny, Kirsten mentioned that a lot of people felt like the president capitulated on the issue of the tax cuts being extended, and there were Republicans who were screaming about the issue of the START treaty, that there weren't more Republicans who stood firm against that.
Well, and certainly conservative security hawks were concerned about Don't Ask, Don't Tell and START, and at the end of the day, they got enough of the more moderate wing of the party to agree, and then, it was a win. But I think it's going to be a different Congress, and I think that they won't win so easily, coming this January. But there's 12 new senators coming in. But I do worry about, is Scott Brown the new Arlen Specter? Burr from Senator Burr from North Carolina, he votes for moderately now. It's going to be interesting to see. There's going to be a realignment, I think.
They show a lot of independence, both of them. Maybe we need to get both of you elected up there on Capitol Hill. Let you hear that up there.
We've said.
Here's